London, 1967. Backstage at a small blues club, Jimi Hendrix turned to Eric Clapton and said, "You can play blues, Eric, but you can't play like me." Clapton smiled and said 5 words that would lead to the most legendary guitar battle in rock history. "Let me borrow your guitar." What happened next left Hendrix standing on stage applauding and changed how both men saw their instruments forever. The club was called the Speakeasy, and it was the place where London's music elite gathered after their own shows ended. On any given night, you might see members of the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, all crammed into this tiny basement venue on Margaret Street. But on this particular night in late March 1967, 2 men were about to have a conversation that would become the stuff of legend. Eric Clapton was already being called God by London's music scene. His work with the Yardbirds, John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and now Cream had established him as the definitive British blues guitarist. He played with a purity, a respect for the American blues masters that bordered on religious devotion. B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, Clapton channeled them all. Jimi Hendrix was the new arrival, the American who'd been brought to London by Chas Chandler just 6 months earlier. But in those 6 months, Hendrix had turned the guitar world upside down. He played the instrument like it was an extension of his nervous system, behind his back, with his teeth, creating feedback that sounded like spaceships and symphonies. He was doing things that shouldn't be possible. The 2 men had heard about each other. How could they not? In the small, incestuous world of London rock music in 1967, everyone knew everyone. But they'd never actually met, never played together, and there was a tension in the air that night, the kind of tension that happens when 2 alpha predators meet for the first time. Hendrix was sitting in a corner booth with his manager and Noel Redding, his bass player. Clapton walked in around midnight, fresh from a Cream show at the Marquee Club. He was wearing his trademark velvet jacket, his hair long and unkempt. When he walked past Hendrix's table, Hendrix called out, "Jimi Hendrix, slow hand himself." Clapton stopped, turned, smiled. "Jimi Hendrix, I've heard about you." "Good things, I hope," Hendrix said, his American accent cutting through the London voices around them. "Interesting things," Clapton replied. "They say you set your guitar on fire." "Only when it deserves it," Hendrix laughed. He gestured to the empty seat. "Sit down, have a drink." What happened over the next hour was a conversation that started friendly and gradually became something else. They talked about blues, about the masters they both loved. Hendrix praised Clapton's recent work. Clapton complimented Hendrix's debut album, Are You Experienced, which had just been released.
But underneath the politeness, there was a current of competition. 2 guitarists, both being told they were the best, both knowing that only one could truly hold that title. Then Eric Burdon of the Animals walked over. He'd had a few drinks, and he did what drunk musicians do. He stirred the pot. "So which of you is actually better?" Burdon asked, laughing. The table went quiet. Hendrix and Clapton looked at each other. The moment stretched out. Other musicians nearby had stopped their conversations and were listening now. Hendrix broke the silence. "Eric's the best blues guitarist alive, no question." Clapton nodded in acknowledgement. "Jimmy's doing things I've never seen before. He's from the future." "But here's the thing," Hendrix continued, and there was an edge to his voice now. "Eric plays the blues the way it should be played, traditional, pure, beautiful. But what I do, that's different. That's not something you can learn from Robert Johnson records." Clapton's expression didn't change, but people who knew him could see his jaw tighten slightly. "What are you saying, Jimmy?" "I'm saying you can play blues, Eric. You can play it better than almost anyone, but you can't play like me." The room had gone completely silent now. This was either going to end in a handshake or a disaster. Clapton stood up slowly.
He looked at Hendrix for a long moment. Then he smiled, that slight, confident smile that his bandmates knew meant he was about to do something unexpected. "Let me borrow your guitar," Clapton said quietly. Hendrix raised an eyebrow. "My guitar? If I can't play like you, prove it. Let me use your guitar, your amp, your setup. You play something, anything you want. Show everyone what you can do that I can't. Then I'll try the same thing. If I fail, I buy drinks for everyone here all night. If I succeed, we both buy drinks for everyone, because that would mean we're both pretty damn good." The room erupted in excited chatter. This was unprecedented. Guitar players didn't challenge each other like this, not publicly. It was too risky, too much ego on the line. Hendrix stared at Clapton, trying to read him. Was this confidence or insanity? Did Clapton really think he could replicate Hendrix's style, just like that, on Hendrix's own guitar? "You're serious?" "Completely." Hendrix broke into a huge smile. All right, let's do this." The club's owner, seeing what was about to happen, immediately stopped the band that was playing and cleared the stage. Word spread through the speakeasy like electricity. Hendrix and Clapton were about to battle. Within minutes, every musician in the club had crowded toward the stage. Pete Townsend was there. Jeff Beck had just walked in. Jack Bruce, Clapton's bandmate from Cream, was watching from the side, shaking his head in disbelief. Hendrix's guitar tech brought out Jimmy's white Fender Stratocaster, the one he'd used to record Purple Haze, and plugged it into his Marshall stack, the same setup Hendrix used to create his otherworldly sounds. Hendrix took the stage first. He strapped on his guitar, adjusted the amp settings to his preferred configuration, and looked out at the crowd of his peers. Then he looked directly at Clapton and grinned. "You asked for it, man." What Hendrix played over the next 5 minutes was a masterclass in everything that made him revolutionary. He started with the opening riff to Voodoo Child's Slight Return, a song he hadn't even recorded yet, one that wouldn't be released for another year. The wah-wah pedal crying and screaming under his fingers like it was having a conversation with God. He played behind his head, the guitar still singing perfectly, each note clear despite the impossible angle. His fingers moved across the fretboard without him even looking, muscle memory and intuition replacing sight. The crowd gasped. They'd heard about this trick, but seeing it live was different. It wasn't showmanship for its own sake. The music was still perfect, still emotional, still exactly what it needed to be. Then he created feedback loops that sounded like fighter jets and crying babies and laughing demons. He'd lean into his amplifier, controlling the feedback with his body position, sculpting noise into melody. What should have been chaotic screeching became orchestral, symphonic. He was conducting electricity itself. He bent strings so far they should have snapped. On the high E string, he pushed the note up 2 full steps, something that should break the string or at least destroy the tuning. But Hendrix's fingers knew exactly how far to push, exactly how much tension the string could take. Each bend was a conversation with physics, and Hendrix was winning the argument. He hit the tremolo bar so hard the guitar went completely out of tune, the strings going slack and warbly. Everyone in the room winced. He'd just ruined his guitar on stage. But then, while still playing with his right hand, he used his left hand to retune the guitar by pulling on the strings themselves, bending them back into pitch while they were ringing. It was like watching someone rebuild a car engine while driving it. He used his thumb to fret bass notes on the low E string, while his fingers created melody lines on the higher strings, something that was supposed to be physically impossible. Most guitarists could barely fret with their thumb at all. Hendrix was playing 2 separate musical lines simultaneously, bass and lead, like he had 2 hands doing the work of 4. The performance was sexual, violent, tender, and terrifying all at once. This was why Hendrix was changing music. He wasn't just playing guitar, he was wrestling with it, making love to it, fighting it, becoming one with it. The instrument wasn't separate from him. It was another limb, another voice, another way of expressing things that words couldn't touch. When he finished, the room was in chaos. Musicians were shouting, applauding, laughing in disbelief. Pete Townshend was shaking his head, looking like he might cry. Even the bartenders had stopped working to watch. Hendrix unplugged his guitar and handed it to Clapton. As he did, he leaned in close and said, just loud enough for Clapton to hear, "You can't play like that, Eric. Nobody can. That's not blues. That's me." Clapton took the guitar. It was warm from Hendrix's body heat, the strings still humming with residual energy. He looked at it for a moment, feeling its weight, its balance. This was Hendrix's instrument, set up exactly how Hendrix liked it. Different action, different string tension, different everything from what Clapton was used to. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation. Some people thought Clapton would back out, claim it was just a joke. Others thought he'd try and fail, which would be painful to watch. Almost nobody thought he could actually do what Hendrix had just done. Clapton plugged in. He didn't adjust the amp settings. He didn't change anything. He was going to play with Hendrix's exact setup. He started with a simple blues progression in E. Nothing fancy, just clean, beautiful blues. The room relaxed slightly. Okay, Clapton was going to play his style, not try to copy Hendrix. That was smart, safe. But then something shifted. Clapton started incorporating Hendrix's techniques, but with his blues foundation underneath. He used the wah-wah pedal, but made it cry like a blues harmonica instead of scream like a banshee. He created feedback, but controlled it, made it melodic, made it serve the song instead of dominate it. He played behind his head, something he'd never done before in public, but when he did it, the notes were pure blues scale, B.B. King style, just in an impossible position. He was using Hendrix's tricks, but speaking in his own language. Then he did something that made Hendrix's eyes go wide. He started playing one of Hendrix's own riffs, a section from Foxy Lady, but he played it slow, mournful, like it was an old Delta blues song. He took Hendrix's futuristic rock and roll and revealed the blues DNA underneath it. He showed everyone in that room that Hendrix's revolution was built on the same foundation that Clapton worshipped.
The room was dead silent now. This wasn't a copy. This wasn't mimicry. This was translation. Clapton was taking Hendrix's language and proving it was a dialect of the same language they both spoke. For his finale, Clapton did something nobody expected. He played a traditional Robert Johnson song, Crossroad Blues, but he played it using every Hendrix technique he'd just learned in those 5 minutes. Feedback and wah-wah and tremolo bar dive bombs, all serving a song written in Mississippi in the 1930s. He was showing that the distance between Robert Johnson and Jimi Hendrix wasn't as far as people thought. When Clapton hit the final note, he let it sustain, using Hendrix's amplifier settings to let the feedback build and build until the note transformed into pure sound, pure emotion, neither blues nor rock, but something transcendent. Then he let it fade to silence. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Jimi Hendrix started clapping, slow, deliberate applause. He walked onto the stage, still clapping, a huge smile on his face. Others joined in, and suddenly the entire club was erupting in applause. Hendrix took his guitar back from Clapton. He looked at it, then looked at Clapton. "How did you make my guitar sound like that?" Clapton shrugged. "It's still a guitar, Jimmy, still 6 strings, still the same notes. You just found different ways to get to them." "That's not what I asked. I asked how you made it sound like yours while using all my tricks." "Because they're not just your tricks," Clapton said. "They're guitar tricks. You invented them. You showed us they exist. But once something exists, it becomes part of the language, and we can all use language, right?" Hendrix was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that people who were there still remember. "You're the most dangerous guitarist I've ever met." Clapton looked confused. "Dangerous?" "Because you can learn anything. You just watched me for 5 minutes and absorbed it, made it yours. That's dangerous, man. That means there's nothing you can't eventually do." "I could say the same about you," Clapton replied. "What you're doing, nobody taught you that. You're inventing it in real time. If anything, you're the dangerous one." Hendrix laughed. Then he did something unexpected. He unplugged his white Stratocaster and handed it to Clapton. "Here, keep it for a week. Learn everything it can do. Then we trade. I'll borrow one of your guitars. We'll teach each other." What happened over the next week became legendary among the musicians who were part of that scene. Hendrix and Clapton essentially became students of each other. Hendrix would show up at Cream rehearsals, and Clapton would demonstrate traditional blues techniques, the subtle bends and vibrato that made blues guitar sing. Clapton would go to Hendrix's flat, and Hendrix would teach him feedback control, wah-wah dynamics, the physical theater of playing guitar. They jammed together constantly, sometimes in studios, sometimes in living rooms, sometimes on actual stages. The recordings that exist from these sessions are treasured by collectors. You can hear two masters learning from each other in real time.
Eric Burdon, who'd started the whole confrontation, later said, "I thought I was going to start a fight. Instead, I created one of the most beautiful friendships in rock music. They could have been rivals. Instead, they became each other's teachers." The story of that night at the Speakeasy spread through London and then the world. It became exaggerated, mythologized, changed with each telling. Some versions have them playing for hours. Some have them destroying the stage. Some have other famous guitarists joining in. But the people who were actually there remember it differently. They remember two men, both at the absolute peak of their powers, discovering that there's always more to learn. They remember the moment when competition transformed into collaboration. Jeff Beck, who witnessed the whole thing, said it best. "That night, the two best guitarists on the planet proved they were both right. Hendrix was doing things nobody else could do, and Clapton proved he could learn anything. They weren't opponents. They were proof that mastery isn't a single destination, it's a conversation." Hendrix died 3 years later, in 1970. He was only 27 years old. At his funeral, Clapton was too devastated to attend, but he released a statement that few people remember. "Jimmy taught me that the guitar isn't a museum piece. It's a living thing that should always be evolving. Every time I play now, I hear his voice asking me, 'What's next? What haven't you tried yet?'" In interviews decades later, Clapton would describe that night as one of the most important of his career. "People think Jimmy challenged me and we had this big rivalry. That's not what happened. Jimmy challenged me to expand, and I challenged him to remember his roots. We made each other better." The white Stratocaster that Hendrix lent Clapton that night was returned a week later, as promised, but Hendrix had made a small addition to it. He'd written in tiny letters on the back of the headstock, "For Eric, the dangerous one." That guitar is now worth millions, but the real value wasn't in the instrument, it was in what that exchange represented. Two masters, both convinced they knew the limits of their instrument, discovering that the limits were imaginary. Two rivals becoming collaborators, two gods discovering that divinity is more fun when it's shared. That's what happened the night Eric Clapton borrowed Jimi Hendrix's guitar. Not a battle, not a contest, a beginning. A beginning of a friendship, a beginning of mutual respect, a beginning of the understanding that the greatest artists don't tear each other down, they lift each other up. And that's more legendary than any guitar battle could ever be.